Hi, I'm Lauren Malhoit. I'm a technical marketing engineer with Cisco in the NCMA BU. I'm going to talk a little bit about VMware integration. I know you guys are networking people, so hopefully you care a little bit, or at least it'll give you something to talk about at the next CXI party at VMworld or something. So first we'll talk a little bit about just the high level of how we actually hook into VMware, although we do work with other hypervisors, Hyper-V, KVM, et cetera. So we're going to assume that you have an Apec, which is our application policy infrastructure controller, of course, and let's say you already have a vCenter or several vCenters, a vSphere environment in general, right? Within the Apec, we're going to create what we call a Emm Domain, and that stands for Virtual Machine Manager. And it's basically just a right-click and you specify your vCenter IP, FQDN, the credentials, all of that good stuff, and then it will magically, through the use of vCenter APIs, actually create a distributed virtual switch. This could be a vSphere distributed switch that comes along with, VMware and vCenter, depending on the licensing that you use. It could actually be a Cisco application virtual switch too. The AVS is like a variant of Nexus 1000V, if you will. So that's all well and good. And in the Apec, as you know, we create EPGs, maybe web, app, and database, because all of our applications look like that, right? All 3 tiers, web, app, and DB. The cool thing about this is once we create those EPGs, again, through the use of the APIs, we actually get the same port groups over here. And they're called web, app, and DB, aptly named, right? So as Carly had here earlier, the application profile, where we have contracts in between these endpoint groups, we will do the same thing and put in contracts and all that good stuff right there. Apply the policy, if you will, apply layer 4 through 7 devices like firewalls and load balancers. And that policy will get applied to those port groups automatically. That is the basics of how it works. We actually use CDP or LLDP to communicate with the DVS. We will create a new DVS. It doesn't work with one that you already have currently, although you could do other things like just setting up a bare metal association, but you wouldn't get that natural VMware integration that way. So any questions from a high level there? This is just kind of a prettier picture. I have the writing of a junior high boy, I've been told, so I have the haircut to match too, so Any questions there? All right. So Carly already talked a little bit about microsegmentation. I won't waste your time with everything she's told you, but I'll give you a few more details. As she said, we automatically pull in VMs maybe by any one of these attributes, VM name, operating system, et cetera, et cetera. The cool thing is that the endpoint group gets created on the Apec side for Cisco, but you actually don't see that endpoint group on the DVS. It stays in the original endpoint group. So we're still applying policy in the same way, but it's kind of invisible to the VMware administrator. So one thing you could possibly do if you want, depending on how you work with your VMware folks, is create like a baseline port group really for them so that they don't have to worry about the networking so much anymore, right? Because they don't want to go and learn all the networking and learn the policies and all that good stuff. Maybe some do, but maybe they don't. So then you can actually go ahead and do that policy on your end, worry about the networking and all that good stuff, while the VMware admin can do their job as well. So, any questions? Okay. Intra-Epg isolation. And Carly already mentioned this. It basically turns off that communication between VMs or, VMs generally in the EPG, right? So the cool thing about this, though, is actually, that's great that they can't communicate. It's very secure and all of that good stuff. But we still only have to create one contract between these two EPGs, right? So think of all those ACLs and ACEs that you have to create in order to accomplish this in a more traditional network, right? But with this, we create one contract. Maybe it has one or several filters, and we're good to go. And then you can still have, Web 1 can talk to App 1 over HTTP or whatever protocol you're using. And Web 1 can talk to App 2 and so on over HTTP and whatever other filters you're describing. So this is a really cool use case, right? Because in general, we don't want our app servers to be able to talk to each other. They just need to talk to the web servers. Or let's think of a DMZ. You know, you don't want all of those VMs communicating, because that's where we get issues if something's been pwned or hacked or whatever you want to call it. That's where we get those issues on the inside network, or especially in the DMZ, because it's a little more open maybe.
Kind of reminds me of a private VLAN isolated.
It is basically, it is a PVLAN. That's the kind of technology that we use. But it's literally just ticking a check mark when you create an EPG. Yeah. So it's really easy to implement. Now,
logistically, if you wanted to have Web 1 talk to App 1 and App 2, you'd have to set up a separate policy in order to allow that?
Just one policy. Yeah. So this is all one contract that I created one time. And I didn't even have to apply it several times, you know. It's not even that case where I'm copying it over, which is a possibility if we were talking about putting that contract between two other EPGs. But in this case, yeah, it's just one contract.
So you could then specify to say this one, using this contract for connectivity between these two things, can then talk to these two endpoints on the other end?
No, it has to be by endpoint group.
Okay.
So if you wanted to do that, you would actually have to break up, put two of the app VMs in a different endpoint group.
Okay.
And then apply the policy that way.
I think that answered my question. So if I want App 1 and App 2 to talk.
If you want App 1 and App 2.
Yeah,
okay.
If I want them to talk. Do I put them in different EPGs, or is it that checkbox on like a per app kind of basis?
So yeah, if you turn on Epg Isolation, nothing can talk inside there ever. It's I mean, it's a PVLAN.
Yeah. So okay.
Yes, so you would have to either do that or not turn on Epg Isolation, obviously. But you know, we are going.
Even with a contract, you can't make two.
You can't put contracts in one EPG.
Inside of an EPG.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So if you don't want those hosts in the EPG to talk, you really don't ever want them
It is the most secure. I mean, we're talking a pure whitelist model with ACI. If you don't have a contract between my two EPGs, they can't ever talk, right?
But I mean,
and then inside.
But if you check that box on an EPG, there's not even a whitelist option inside of that EPG.
No.
Yep.
Private VLAN.
Yeah. Yes. So it is the most secure way
And you
can do it. Yeah.
You can turn intra-EPG isolation on a per EPG basis.
Yes.
So you can have your highly restrictive EPGs,
Right.
and then you have your more open EPGs where you
Right.
need a little more liberal policy.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you needed a test or something, you could uncheck that checkbox and go in and do your pinging or whatever you need to do. Of course, we have a ton of visibility with the Apec and other troubleshooting tools. So some of the more traditional ways, although I know that's more comfortable, is get on the CLI and go ahead and start pinging stuff. But
if you had hosts that you had to keep that were old OSs that no longer get patched, that is a perfect use case for that.
Yes.
Like we're going to put all of our Windows XP VMs, like there is such a thing. It does happen.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, and we're going to put those all
I've managed
them. They can't talk to one another, and then they can only talk outside of the EPG to host some ports and protocols that she explicitly defined in the contract.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. So this is just kind of like a little wrap up where I'm going to talk a little bit more about security within the virtual realm, really. So as we know, we can obviously isolate VM traffic and make it secure and all that good stuff with ACI. But what you also get with ACI is the ability to do your vkernel port groups, right? So things like management, fault tolerance, vMotion. Those are all going to be in an EPG and all going to have policy applied. Of course, any other hypervisor, I mentioned Hyper-V, KVM, and bare metal servers, because let's not forget, if we want the security in the virtual realm, we probably want the similar security in the physical realm. And, anything holding ESXi is going to be physical, right? Or any of your hypervisors. So we still want to secure those physical things as well. And as it says, 75% of our servers are bare metal, which is a little confusing since 70% of our workloads are virtual. But if you really think about the amount of physical machines still in a data center, there's a lot.
And this doesn't apply just to servers. And when we say bare metal at that point, we can apply that to appliances that that are physical.
Layer 2 through 7 appliances. Yeah, you could have switches, you could have firewalls, anything really in an endpoint group, and then apply policy to those. And virtual or physical appliances as well. and from different members of the ecosystem, Juniper, F5, various things. So it's not just Cisco ASAVs or something like that, Okay, so next I'm going to talk about the Vcenter plugin for ACI. And I tested my live demo and it's a little slow because I'm going over a VPN connection to the Netherlands. So luckily, I listened to Tom's sage advice and made a backup video. Okay, so this is our Apec here. We're looking at a view of the tenants. You can see common infra, mine, my coworkers, and the management tenant so far. Now I'm in my vSphere client. And the ACI plugin is simply a plugin like any other plugin for vCenter. So we click on the ACI Fabric plugin, and I'm going to create a tenant. This will actually create a tenant within ACI. Give it a name, TFC, of course, just so you guys know I made this special for you. Pick a fabric. I may have multiple fabrics. So I've now created a new tenant. I can go in my Apec. It's automatically there. I didn't even fast forward that part. It's immediate like that. So you can create a tenant from the VMware admin perspective. Just so you know, we do have role-based access controls. So if you don't want them, they can purely consume as well. If I click on the ACI fabric, I can see different information about it, versioning, the tenants from that view as well. So the VMware admin will be able to see all of this. I click on the networking portion. I select my new tenant, my TFD tenant, and I can create a VRF from here, my virtual routing and forwarding. And there's already a VRF and bridge domain within this. It gets created when you create the tenant. You can delete it, you can do whatever you like with it, leave it there, up to you. But we'll create our VRF. And of course the bridge domain, because we're going to need a default gateway to get out. And we need something to hold those subnets, right? And we'll call it TFD BD. I'm being kind of generic here. Obviously, we would have, various bridge domains. We'll give it a default gateway, 1.1.1.1/24, or whatever subnet. Maybe you're communicating with your VMware admin. Maybe you've given them a /24 and they can figure out how to break that up, or you've given them several subnet pools to work with, kind of up to the networking folks on how they want to work with that. We're trying to break silos a little bit here, right? Maybe talk to each other. But not too much. That's why we're giving them this, so that they don't have to bug you with every single question, right? So I have my VRF and my bridge domain, and now I can create my application profile. Remember, this is where we have endpoint groups and contracts in between, maybe layer 4 through 7 device. It's literally as easy as dragging and dropping. Drag down my EPG onto my canvas. Give it a name, maybe TFD web. It specifies which DVS it's on, and we can specify the bridge domain that we'd like it to be on. Probably that bridge domain I just created. Again, that gives it that kind of SVI to get out to other things. And we'll just click OK. Now maybe my app EPG wants to be what we lovingly call a USEG EPG, although we probably should call it MUSEG, but but it stands for microsegmentation, obviously. And this is the one where it's going to pull in, VMs, maybe with a certain VM name or with a certain operating system or IP sets and all of that good stuff. Specify the bridge domain once again. And here's my little tick box where I turn on entry Epg Isolation. And again, when the traffic is forwarded then, it just checks for that flag. If the flag's there, it won't forward it. If it is there, or if it's not there, it will forward it. You know what I mean? Here's where I specify the specific VM attribute, whatever I want to use to do that intra Epg isolation, or I'm sorry, to do the microsegmentation. And I just specified TFD app. So any VM that has TFD-app in the name will get pulled into this EPG from an Apec point of view. And then, of course, we'll apply a contract because we want these to be able to communicate somehow, some way. Here's where you could specify anything, FTP, HTTP, any one of your thousands of protocols, I'm sure, that you have to apply. Within one contract, we can specify this, right? I already have filters created, or I'm sorry, I don't yet. So what I'm going to do is show it creating a filter in the Apec. Because again, you can do this from the Apec side and then let your VMware admin just consume these, basic constructs. So I'll just create a filter that allows ICMP. And it's pretty easy to create these filters. I don't know how familiar you guys are with this GUI. You could also do this using the CLI if you wanted, or the APIs. Click Update and Submit. And again, I didn't even have to fast forward this part. It immediately is in my filters now. I didn't even have to restart that little wizard there. Just drag and drop it, ICMP. Now I'll be able to ping between the two. You notice there's a bidirectional check mark that allows it in both ways. I can uncheck that if I want, but remember, having to create ACLs like that, there's no such thing as really a bidirectional ACL, right? Where we have to create a lot of those command line style. Now I'm just taking a look at the application profile in my Apec, and this is what it created. You see the contract at the top, you see the regular EPG, the USAG EPG, and then down here is where we've specified that it's attached to a certain Emm domain. We could have done this all in the Apec too, using the drag and drop, or using wizards, using command line, APIs, etc. You get the hint. Basically, you can do it all three ways for pretty much everything. Troubleshooting, we have a troubleshooting tool. You can specify virtual machines, you can specify endpoint groups, you can specify port groups, et cetera, et cetera. Just check what contracts are between them, and more to the point, the filters actually within the contract. Because likely you're going to have one common contract that allows maybe DNS, DHCP, Active Directory, all that good stuff. So I'll specify 2 VMs here, my source and destination, just click a button, and I can see which filters are allowed between those two things. So if I'm not able to ping, let's say, go see if ICMP is in there. If it's not in there, maybe that's the issue. Hopefully it is. Virtual machines, I can see all of my virtual machines in here and actually expand them and see which network adapters they're using. So if I have something flapping or something like that, it's very easy to find out which network adapter they're using so that I can go check that quickly. And obviously from the Apec, we have a lot more visibility into that networking. We have atomic counters and more troubleshooting tools. But this is really nice for the VMware admin. Now, here we only see one EPG. Does anyone know why that is in our vSphere web client? Because that microsegmentation EPG does not appear in the vSphere web client, right? That only appears on the Apec. So we saw it in the Apec when I showed you the application profile. Security, we can create contracts and filters actually within the vSphere web client. So I didn't have to go to the Apec if I didn't want to. External connectivity, layer 2 and layer 3, I can consume that after it's been created in the Apec. So that's going to be more of a consumption-based thing. Same with layer 4 through 7 services. Those have to be created within the Apec, and then I can consume them as a VMware admin. So this shows you kind of a more complex EPG with Cisco ASA virtual in the contract itself. So the ASAV is in there. You can see it's as simple as just dragging it in between 2 EPGs. This one's unmanaged, meaning that we are actually managing it from the ASA GUI instead of the Apec. We can get traffic stats for everything immediately. Again, a lot of visualization and pretty graphs and all of that good stuff, see faults, get audit logs and all of that from the VMware side and the Apec side. So makes troubleshooting, again, a lot easier. That's pretty much it. So any questions before I let my other colleagues jump up here?
So what is the level of integration into NSX with this?
So NSX can ride on top of ACI, no problem. We see that as an application like any other application. It's not necessarily integrated into the ACI plugin, but definitely with ACI we can work with NSX.
Because yeah, that's one of the first things I can think of is if you're an NSX shop, then when you're provisioning out a new domain or whatever that's called, you can provision out your routed links down, what subnets they have, push them down.
Yep.
To help that painful process they evidently have of deploying that type of stuff.
So one thing too is with NSX controllers, which used to be V-shielded controllers, they can do VXLAN natively. So then you're actually, instead of using VLANs from your VMs and up, you can actually do VXLAN at that point too, and have it all be VXLAN. Because obviously the ACI fabric is all VXLAN.
But there's just not that visibility into ACI with that type of level.
I mean, we'd still be able to do all of the same visibility that we would with any other application or network, but there's no ACI plugin or anything like that where you could configure it from there. But it's all the vSphere web client, right? So it's all the one panel anyway, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's where I come from with it is, start at one place, have it blow out as much as it possibly can. And then what it can't touch, then you go.
Absolutely.
And so the more you can do in one central place would be nice.
Right. Yeah, I'll take that back. Thank you.
I've got 2 questions.
Sure.
You say we can do all this through the GUIs for pretty much everything. Pretty much everything. There are things we can't do that require us.
I just talk like that in vagueness.
I just want to make sure, because sometimes it's like, you can do everything, well, except for this whole feature set and advanced options you have to drop to a CLI for.
No.
And, okay, that's cool. And we only see the one EPG, and the other one's exposed through the Apec.
Yep.
Is it exposed inside of vCenter at all? So, or if I were running ESX CLI commands or stuff along those lines?
I don't know that. I would have to double check. As far as I know, it's not, but don't quote me on that. I'll have to double check on that one. Take it home.